Well, hello there. Thanks for joining me. I am Dr. Jen, and I am so pleased that you have joined me today for our show and educating yourself about the location-specific tenancy guidelines for the US Territory of Guam. Now, in all of my location-specific episodes, I've included hyperlinks, including all kinds of resources, everything I can find really regarding that location. And in this case, Guam's Landlord and Tenant Rental Act of 2018. Each of my location specific podcasts is set up in the same way, answering the same four questions. What are the basics of the landlord and tenant laws in that location? What are some nuances in that location based on other places that we've studied? Three, some guidance about abandoned items left behind by a tenant in that location. And then four, where do you even get help as a landlord in that location? So I must tell you that there are more guiding documents. There is more guidance in general than what I'm going to give you here. So it's really important that you do your own due diligence as a landlord having a rental in Guam. And there's more to it, but this will get you a running start. So there we go. Also, I need to give a plug today for the sponsor of this episode, Aloha Capital Investments LLC. If you want to know more about real estate investing, check out alohajv.com. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. If you're watching this on YouTube at My Life as a Landlord, I'm going to share screen. I only have three resources for Guam, which is usually I have a lot more than three. I usually have like five or six or sometimes as many as 10. But in Guam, I only have three. Guam is a small place, and the main industry on Guam, I would venture to say, is the military. But it is a US territory, so it's covered by federal law in the US. And what we've got here is we've got 12 pages of the Guam Landlord Tenant Rental Act of 2018. Now, we're going to go through this because there's no guide. This is it. But I'm going to show you the other two websites before we do that so that you can see all of the resources yourself, especially if you're watching on YouTube. So, consumer resources. So if you go to Guam Real Estate Commission, there is quite a bit of information about consumer resources in general, not just as landlord stuff, but the real estate code, Title 21, that's actually the other document we're about to go through. So you're going to see this. Forcible entry and detainer. This is a writ of possession. This is if you have to evict a tenant, this is how you do it. Information about homesteads, horizontal property regime, which is basically like a condominiumized CPR type thing, like it's a kind of a game plan for your real estate. Guam Landlord Rental Act. Oh, real estate code. I must be, no, I'm wrong. Let me click this. That is what we have open. Yep, that's the one we have open. What is this one then? Real estate code, Title 21 is something different. Okay, okay. Oh, this is everything. Universal Commercial Code, Finance and Taxation, Health and Safety, Criminal Procedure, Guam Rules of Evidence. Interesting. Okay, eminent domain. So there's a lot of information. Real estate law, real estate regulations. Okay, vehicles. Okay, different. Let me go back to that original one. So that's this one. Guam Landlord Tenant Rental Act of 2018. That's this one. Land management, zoning law, subdivision law. So you can see Guam is such a small place that they kind of lumped everything in one website, which is why I don't have a whole lot of resources. So here it is. Land Trust Commission, Real Estate Administration, Real Estate Regulations, Home Warranties, and Fair Housing Act, which is the federal one, right? And then you've got all of Guam, the government of Guam agencies, Office of the Governor, and everybody that's here. So it's sort of a one-stop shop, if you will, on Guam. This is kind of interesting, but there's lots of different information that this is GuamRealEstateCommission.com. And once again, this hyperlink is in the description of the podcast. So let's go. Where's the other one? Well, that's the one we just opened. There's this one. Oh, I'm missing one. Hang on a second here. Oh, the Housing Authority. Yeah, we're missing the Housing Authority one. That's what's happened. Oh, no, we're not. Here it is, right there. Okay, so you've got the Guam Housing Authority, so GHURA.org. And this one is the Housing Authority. So this is all about housing in general, but you've also got the so here it is, landlord of info and available listings and online housing applications, rent payments. You basically have a one-stop shop for rentals, but it's not just like normally a housing authority is like subsidized rentals or assistant rentals. That doesn't appear to be the case on Guam. This one is more of a landlord unit for rent. Yeah, landlord statement, landlord direct deposit form. So these are vouchers, available listings, COVID fact sheet, landlord FAQ sheet. So there is some of the housing authority voucher stuff in here, but it looks like you can put in here non-Section 8 housing as well. And I don't think I've got that wrong. I think that's right. I may be wrong about that. All about housing. Let's just go here. So here we go. Notice about public housing applications, wait lists, online housing applications. Oh, that must be, I'm telling you, this housing authority must be just for Section 8. It must be for assistance. But I didn't think it was, but it looks like it is. It looks like it's all just for assistance housing. Okay, support programs, multifamily housing services, housing needs assessment report. I bet that's a research report, and the contact information. Okay. Hmm. So yeah, okay, so it is all public housing. Okay, I wasn't expecting that. It didn't appear that it was because it just said landlord info and available listings, which made me think it was third party as well. That doesn't appear to be the case. Okay. Well, it is another resource for help. If you're lost and you don't know what to do, then you can call or email these guys and they will guide you because Guam is not a very big place and I'm sure they are aware of different locations. So if you are a landlord on Guam or you're new to being a landlord on Guam, ghura.org and their contact information looks like they've got multiple locations, which is cool. I've never been to Guam. If you have, please message me. I think that would be cool. Okay, let's go through the Guam Landlord Tenant Rental Act of 2018. Some of this is just very generic. Remember, this is the law, so it's very legalese, and there isn't a guide. So normally there's a guide, but even the law is only 12 pages. Like we're not talking, this is not a whole lot of time. Not a lot. It's not very in depth here. Okay. This is talking about definitions, landlord, normal wear and tear, deterioration or depreciation in value by ordinary and reasonable use does not include items that are missing from the dwelling unit. Interesting, I'm not seeing it that way. An owner, premises, rent payments, they define all this. Security deposit means money deposited by or for the tenant with the landlord to be held by the landlord to remedy tenant defaults for accidental or intentional damages. Cleaning the dwelling unit or having it cleaned at the termination of the rental dwelling. Of course, I'm summarizing. I'm not going to read the whole thing. And the third thing, compensating for damages caused by the tenant who wrongfully quits the dwelling unit, meaning they quit it early. This is a abrupt end to a fixed lease, meaning you will be in a holdover situation. So if there is an early out and it appears to be a bit of an acceleration clause, but it might be here. We'll see. Okay, for terms and conditions of the rental agreement, you've got to make sure, yeah, you can't have anything prohibited against the rental agreement. That's always in here. Okay, security deposits. Here we go. Total amount of security deposit may not be in excess of 1 month's rent. Landlords may charge an additional reasonable pet deposit not to exceed $500 per pet. Per pet. Wow. Landlords may not collect more than first month's rent, security deposit, including pet deposit if appropriate at the time of lease commencement. So there is a cap on what you can get. So first month's rent and security deposit, which includes the pet deposit. So that your limit is 1 month's rent. That's it. And then the rent would be on top of it. So even if you did a pet deposit, you can only you could do a pet deposit later on, it looks like. Okay, and this at the end, if the landlord has lawful grounds to retain all or any portion of the security deposit, the landlord must notify the tenant in writing with the reasons for retention. Any costs such as cleaning or specific repairs must be itemized and copies of receipts attached. If the repairs cannot be accomplished within 14 days, estimates for the cleaning or repairs may be substituted. But again, it all has to be in writing and it all has to be justified. It just can't be, you take it, but it's got to be given to the tenant within 14 days. In order to comply with the 14-day requirement, the landlord may mail the material to the tenant on or before the 14th day and shall obtain proof of mailing from the post office. Landlord must also provide compliance within 14 days of requirement of types of evidence, meaning that you've actually got to have a witness, it looks like. Okay, tenant may not use the deposit as last month's rent unless the landlord agrees. And then the tenant would have to pay for damages, but that doesn't normally work out very well. And let's see, legal action involving security deposit disputes. Remember, security deposit is not the landlord's money. It is the tenant's money that the landlord holds. And so if the landlord does not give that back, the court can determine that the landlord will wrongfully or willfully retain all or part of the security deposit and may award the tenant up to 3 times the amount of the security deposit. Whoa. Wow. That's what it is in Hawaii as well. So if you're a landlord and you're wrongfully holding a security deposit, you're being silly because it's going to cost you money. And it's have you paid it or not? If you haven't, they're going to give you judgment. It's pretty cut and dry here. Landlord shall maintain premises to comply with applicable building and housing codes relative to health and safety, which makes sense. Also, you have to make repairs necessary to maintain, and any defective condition of the premises must be taken care of. But the tenant also has a duty to maintain the dwelling unit as well. This is normal. Rules and regulations, right to access. Landlord shall give at least 24 hours notice to enter and enter only during reasonable hours. It says reasonable, it doesn't actually give you hours. That's just fine. And the landlord cannot abuse that. You can't harass tenants and you can't just go in there. Non-compliance by the landlord in general is spelled out. Failure to deliver possession, meaning that the landlord agrees to rent the unit, and then for whatever reason, something is changed before the tenant takes possession, meaning maybe something catastrophic has happened in the unit that the tenant can't actually move in, or something has occurred in the landlord's life and saying, hey, I have to sell the property or I have to move into the unit myself, but he actually can't deliver the unit. So that's failure to deliver possession is it's a thing. Withholding of rent. This is if a landlord fails to remedy a safety-based repair. Wrongful failure to provide essential services, basically a utility that keeps a unit health and safe. That's a tenant can deduct that from the rent. Fire or casualty damage talks about what to do if this happens and what happens if the fire or casualty damage is caused by a tenant or a related party regarding the tenant. You don't get any special treatment if it's your fault. Okay. Oh, this is interesting. Weatherhead damage from windstorm. So if a tenant reports observed damage to the weatherhead or weatherhead post where the damage is related to destructive winds, and it even spells out wind speeds that exceed 34 knots or 40 miles an hour to the landlord or the landlord's contractor, agent, representative, or employee, the landlord must commence or make good faith effort to commence repair to the damaged weatherhead within 10 days following the date that the landlord became aware of the damage. So you actually this is a thing, you actually have to make good faith effort to this. And actually Puerto Rico has got something very similar in here, is that, tenant has a duty to report, landlord has a duty to actually start to repair. And who knows if that can actually go through with it. Interesting. So it talks a little bit more about how the repair to the damage due to weather is in there. Landlord remedies, non-compliance with rental agreement and failure to pay rent. Let's see if there's a late fee in here. It says, landlord may deliver a written notice to the tenant specifying acts and omissions constituting a breach in the lease agreement, and it will terminate upon a date not less than 5 days after receipt of the notice unless it agreed to in writing. If the breach is not remedied within 5 days, the rental agreement shall terminate if the breach is remediable by repairs. Okay, so this, here we go. Here's if rent is unpaid when due and tenant fails to pay rent 5 days after written notice, right? You have to give written notice by the landlord of non-payment and the intention to terminate the rental agreement. If the rent is not paid within that period, the landlord may terminate the rental agreement 30 days after receipt of notice. Wow. So you've got to take a whole month to get that tenant out. They're going to sit there and hopefully they're not destroying the unit. Often that's what happens. Wow. The landlord may actually recover actual damages and obtain injunctive relief for non-compliance by the tenant. Wow, goodness sakes. Then it's got failure to maintain. Remedies for absence, non-use, or abandonment. Here we go. This is the information we need about if a tenant abandons the unit and personal property within the unit. Here it is. So here we go. When the tenant has wrongfully abandoned the premises pursuant to note. Okay, it's very legalese, right? It's not very user-friendly, but it is there. Okay, which the landlord, if the landlord determines that the personal property of the tenant determines to be of value in and around the premises, the landlord may sell such personal property in a commercially reasonable manner, store such personal property at the tenant's expense, or donate the personal property to a charitable organization. But there is a process to it. So before selling or donating such property, the landlord shall make reasonable efforts to apprise the tenant of the identity and the location. So you've got to inventory it, tell them where it is going to be and what day they intend to sell or donate it. So they have this. So you're making a good faith effort to actually help. This is normal, right? This is very normal in most states and locations, and in this case, in a territory. But you want to make sure that you're doing this properly. Okay, so you've got to give notice. Then after notice, landlord may sell the property or donate the property, provided that the sale or donation shall not take place until after 15 days after the notice is mailed, after which the tenant is deemed to have received the notice, or the proceeds of the sale of the property after deduction of accrued rent and costs of storage and sale held in trust, including the cost of the advertising of the items, shall be held in trust for the tenant for 30 days, after which time the proceeds become forfeited to the landlord. There you go. So there's your abandoned premises, abandoned items. Talks about what happens if holdover, meaning the tenant doesn't leave. It's an abrupt end to a fixed lease. Yeah, they've got to pay rent, and then obviously it's got to be eviction and then reasonable attorney's fees. Refusal of lawful access. This is if the tenant is refusing the landlord entry. Early termination of a rental agreement, protection against eviction and liability. Okay, so this is talking about landlord retaliation, right? Landlords cannot retaliate, and lock changes when the victim lives with the perpetrator. This is really important. There's a lot of domestic abuse, and I had no idea it was so prevalent in so many different locations that you've got this, but you've got to really, really do this, do your homework on this, landlords, especially if you've got a rental in Guam or wherever your landlord, wherever your rental is. Okay. Also, it talks about disclosure. Disclosure prohibited. A landlord should not disclose any information provided by a tenant to a third party unless they consent to it, right? So there's a confidentiality. I've seen confidentiality bits on here. Okay, and that's it. There isn't a whole lot to this. This is Guam. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to go through my standard list of items that I kind of do for any location based on what we see here. Okay, tenant application fee. It doesn't talk about a tenant application fee anywhere in here, but there typically is a cost to credit checks, background checks, criminal record checks, things like that. And typically landlords can recoup those costs, but it doesn't say that. So if I was going to ask a question to legal aid or to the consumer, let's see, what is it called? Real estate commission? No, where? Yeah, real estate commission. I'm not sure where else you go. Not a whole lot of places to get help on Guam. So you can always ask them, and they probably know this because, again, it's a very simple document. So it's either there or not. And if it's not, then it's spelled out in the lease. So make sure you have a lease. Grace period for late rent without penalty. We did talk about eviction timing, but we didn't talk about a late fee amount. Typically, it's a flat fee dollar amount or an amount of a percentage of the rent that can be a reasonable late fee. Security deposit method. Didn't talk about the method, but it talked about the amount, especially also with a pet deposit, but it didn't talk about pet rent. I didn't see any pre-made forms. Did talk about lease wording and a bit of the details. No delivery of the signed lease required, but it's always a good idea. It's best practices. Let's see, condition inspection at move-in. Again, best practice, didn't give you any guidance on that. Standard warning letters or wording, nope. Required maintenance inspections, nope. Did talk about rent increases and proper notice of rent increases, so that is in there. Renter's insurance, no mention of renter's insurance. It is an abrupt end to the fixed lease, and it does not appear to be an acceleration clause, meaning if the fixed lease is terminated early, is the tenant still on the hook to pay for the rest of the lease? Didn't seem that way. Condition inspection at move out, no, didn't say that either. Return to deposit, we did talk about that. Use of deposit as last month's rent, no. Landlord retaliation, we did talk about that, but there was no mention of timing, and there may not be any timing. And third-party housing for disputes, or do you go right to court? Looks like you go right to court. Not a whole lot to Guam. We did talk a little bit about the nuances in the area, like weather damage and things like that. There is some guidance about abandoned items, and then where to get help. Again, the three websites that I put in the description, there is a contact us in all three of them. And if you've got a question as a landlord in Guam, that's where you'd go, because it's not a very big place. So you want to do that. Okay, that's it. Guam's pretty easy peasy. There's not a whole lot of moving parts to it. But again, remember, because Guam is a US territory that is also covered by federal law, so you still have to do lead paint disclosure. You still have to do Fair Housing Act applies, and can't discriminate. Like, all the federal laws still apply. Reasonable accommodations for items, service animals, all of that stuff still applies. Even though Guam has got its own set, it still applies. So I think that's it. That's a wrap. Guam is pretty quick. Each of my location-specific podcasts is set up the exact same way, answering the same 4 questions. What are the basics of the Landlord Housing Act in that area? What are the nuances of that location? Some guidance about abandoned items left behind by a tenant in that location, and then where do you get some help in that location? So this is the same format for every location-specific episode. So if you're interested in another geographic area, you already know my framework of what I'm going to talk about, just in a different location. Again, this episode is not all-inclusive. You must do your own research, especially if you have a specific question or something weird is going on. You need to ask for specific help, because there's not a whole lot of online resources that I have found. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you are either new to real estate or you're new to real estate in Guam. So things you can do to help yourself is read all of the resources you possibly can, which is great. And then also check out places where other Guam landlords are meeting, whether it's either in person or virtually, either by Zoom or in social media groups like Facebook and LinkedIn. And if you can't find one specific to Guam, because again, Guam is very small, you might just join a national one, and I'm in almost all of them. So you'll see me in there as well, where you can say, hey, I've got a problem. I'm a landlord on Guam, blah, blah, blah. And they explain it, and other landlords will help you. They will guide you. You might even get guidance from other Guam-based landlords. So that's cool. But get in the same room as other landlords and let them help you. If you learned something from today's show, could you please give me a review on whatever platform you listen to this podcast on, whether it was Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube, or maybe you listen to this at the website, mylifeasalandlord.com. Really appreciate your help with a review. I hope you enjoyed today's show all about US Territory of Guam. Today I'm recording this episode on Maui, Hawaii. Why? Because real estate takes you places. Where do you want real estate to take you? Join me next week for episode 151, where some fellow Toastmasters and I discuss some awkward rental conversations in a round table style. I'll see you there.